She didn't have permission to use the spell, and as punishment, she was turned into a piece of wood. Already the tension and the angst between them is like coming right off the page. Look, that's so cute. It's a little content, so a little drawing is so cute. Hi, I'm Ashley and welcome to my channel and to the start of another reading vlog. And this is a video that I am super excited for because this is the beginning of my fall and spooky season reading. And fall is my favorite time of year, so I'm always super excited to get to read all the magical, witchy, and spooky cute books. And technically at the time of filming this video, it is only August 25th, so fall hasn't officially began yet, but I'm beginning my fall spooky season reading time now so that I have time to read all the books I want to read because I feel like fall and spooky season always goes by way too fast for me. So in this video, I'm going to be reading cozy witch romance books, and so I have 3 books that are on my TBR for this video. The first one is The Spellshop by Sarah Beth Durst. The second one is The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic by Brianne Randall. And then the third one is Witch of Wild Things by Raquel Gillen. So in addition to reading these 3 books in this video, I want to decorate for Halloween, bake a fall-inspired treat, and also do a fall-inspired arts and crafts. And so the book I'm going to start with first is going to be The Spellshop, but before I start this, I want to go grab all my Halloween decorations from the basement and decorate my apartment. So it's the next day and I have a reading update on the Spellshop. So between yesterday and this morning, I've made it to page 124, chapter 12. So first, let me tell you a little bit about what this is about, and then I will talk about my first thoughts. So our story follows Kiela, who is a librarian at the Great Library of Elysium. However, at the start of the story, she is forced to flee the library that has been her home and her job for the last 10 years because it is being attacked by rebels. So her and her sentient spider plant assistant, Kaz, flee the library, and they also take some spell books with them as well. And Kiela's parents passed away years ago, so she only really has herself and her spider plant assistant to rely on. And so at first she's not really sure where they're going to go, but then she remembers her childhood home and she remembers that her family has a cottage there, so she decides that that's where they're going to go, and she hasn't been back to this childhood cottage since her parents and her moved to the city, and that was when she was 9 years old, so she doesn't really know what to expect when she gets there. But her plan is just to lie low at the cottage and to not really interact with many people because she does have these spell books that she took them to save them, but at the same time it's kind of like she stole them because they're not hers. However, her plan to lie low is immediately shattered because the morning after she arrives at the cottage, she wakes up to find a stranger who turns out to be her neighbor in the cottage. And he came over because he had saw her the previous day entering the cottage, and he was worried that she was a trespasser. And we soon learn that this neighbor's name is Laren, and he is just generally a really nice person, and he just wants to help Kiela in any way that he can. But the problem is Kiela is very much an introvert, and so she is wary of him at first, and also there is the fact that she has spell books sitting in the other room that she doesn't want him to accidentally stumble across. And then soon after her interaction with Laren, she realizes that she is going to have to go into the village to get supplies. Mostly she needs food. So she reluctantly goes to the village, and when she does go to the village, she realizes that the island and the village is a lot more run down than she remembers it being, and just the people there also seem like they're worn out and jaded. She soon learns that this is because the king had stopped sending sorcerers to the island, and the king used to send sorcerers to the island in order to maintain the island, help it run smoothly. And these sorcerers used to help regulate the weather, help grow crops, and help the mirror horses have babies. But since they haven't been there, this island is just falling into a state of disrepair. And Kyla decides that she wants to help the island prosper again, and so she is going to try to find a way to discreetly use the spells in the book to make this happen. But she also understands that this is a very dangerous task that she is undertaking, because normal people aren't supposed to use the spells in the spell books, only sorcerers are supposed to use them. But regardless, she is determined to help the village prosper once more, and so our story goes from there. And now for my thoughts. So I am enjoying this so far. The inside flap describes this as a Hallmark rom-com full of mythical creatures and fueled by cinnamon rolls and magic. And so far that is 100% what this is. And the part that says fueled by cinnamon rolls, that is very much true, because one of the first things that Keila eats when she gets to the island is she has a cinnamon roll that is gifted to her by her neighbor, and this cinnamon roll, the way it is described, it makes it sound delicious, and they just keep mentioning cinnamon rolls in the beginning of this book, and now I really just want to eat a cinnamon roll. And one of my favorite parts of this book so far is definitely just the cozy and whimsical magical vibes that this book is giving so far. There are winged cats and mirror horses, and even though the island has fallen on hard times lately, it just still sounds like such a magical place to live. And I feel like the writing style is also adding to the magical and whimsical vibes of the book as well. And I just want to read a passage from the book that shows that side of the writing. And this is on page 8, and it says, "Across the water, she saw a herd of mer horses rise and fall with the waves. Her breath caught in her throat. Half horse and half fish, they were a magnificent sight. She watched, mesmerized, as they cantered through the water. Their hoofs crashed through the waves as their powerful fish tails propelled them forward. Covered in jewel-like scales and made of solid muscle, they were the living embodiment of both beauty and strength. Like the sea itself," Keila thought. One of them tossed its mane, and droplets sprayed up and caught the light, a flash of rainbow. And then another element of the book that I'm really enjoying so far is the world building. And I'm finding the whole magic aspect of the book very interesting so far, because in this world, it seems like only the king and certain noble individuals have been allowed to use magic up to this point, and the spell books were all kept like locked away in the royal libraries. And it seemed in the beginning the king used to help out the common people and used to use the magic for good, but lately he hasn't. And that is why the rebellion takes place at the city where the library was, where Keila was living and working. And the rules about using magic were like very strictly enforced, and it was taken very seriously. And one example of this is Kaz, who is the sentient spider plant, who is Keila's assistant. He was actually created by another librarian who used a spell, but she didn't have permission to use the spell, and as punishment, she was turned into a piece of wood, which is crazy. And so you can see like why Keila herself is super anxious about using the spell books and about being caught. And speaking of Keila, I'm really liking her as a main character, and I can really relate to her being a bookworm and an introvert. And I want to read a little passage on page 7 that describes Keila's personality, because this really resonated with me. So it says, "It wasn't that she didn't like people. It was only that she liked books more. They didn't fuss or judge or mock or reject. They invited you in, fluffed up the pillows on the couch, offered you tea and toast, and shared their hearts with no expectation that you'd do anything more than absorb what they had to give." Just love that little passage. And just the way that passage is written comes across as whimsical and magical as well. And then in addition to Keila, we have also met Kaz, who is her sentient spider plant assistant, and I really like him. He is like full of anxiety, which I can also relate to. And then a third character that I am enjoying is Keila's neighbor, Laren. He is a merhorse caretaker and herder. And he is very much a cinnamon bun character. He is just a super nice guy. He is our love interest for Kayla, and him and Kayla have already been getting to know each other. And I don't know, I don't feel super connected to their romance yet, but I'm not that far into the book yet, so hopefully that will change. But yeah, those are all my thoughts so far on the Spellshop. And I am excited to read more of this. Oh, and also, I forgot to mention earlier in my intro, but I also have 2 manga that I want to read in this video as well. So I have Hi, I'm a Witch, and my crush wants me to make a love potion. This one just sounds really cute, and I've had my eye on it since last year, so I'm excited to finally read this. And then the second one is one that I just picked up randomly at the library the other day, and I know nothing about it. The cover looked really cute. And it is called A Cat from Our World and the Forgotten Witch. So at some point, I will be reading these in this video as well. Hi, so I'm back, and today is September 1st, which is super exciting because we are starting my favorite months of the year, which are September and October. And when September 1st comes around, I'm just like, oh, it's fall. And I know that fall doesn't officially start until September 22nd, but to me it starts September 1st because I always associate the beginning of fall with like school starting up again. Anyways, I have a reading update, and that is I finished the Spellshop. I ended up really enjoying this. I am giving it 4 stars. And the author in her acknowledgements wrote that she wanted this to feel like a warm hug, and this book 100% succeeds at that. And the author also said that the Spellshop is special to her because it's filled with things that bring her joy, and again, I can 100% feel that in this book, and I love that about this book. And just the happy, cozy vibes of this book were one of my favorite parts of it. And there were just so many cozy and heartwarming moments in this book that brought a smile to my face. And another one of my favorite parts of this book was the world building. I would love to live in Kayla's cottage and just be a member of the close-knit community on the island. And Kayla's cottage and the island just felt like such a magical and whimsical place filled with nature and magical creatures. And I love that there was a variety of different magical creatures in this book. There were winged cats, there were unicorns, there were mermaids, there were mer horses, there were forest spirits, and there were sentient plants. And another element that added to the cozy and whimsical vibes of this story was the magic system. And I just love how this magic system, it felt cozy, and even when spells went wrong, they still had an overall cozy and magical feeling to them. For example, at one point, Kayla is trying to tweak a spell to help trees grow better, and one of her attempts results in the tree transforming into an apple-colored bird with a tail made out of cherry blossoms. And I just love how that's described, and it kind of shows that even though it kind of went wrong, something still beautiful and good came of it. And another magical mishap ends up in Kayla creating a sentient cactus plant named Meep, and Meep ends up becoming like one of the most endearing characters in this book. And the magic also ends up bringing Kayla closer to the other people who live on the island as well. Speaking of the townspeople, this book also had a lot of lovable and interesting side characters as well. And I also liked how a lot of the characters in this book weren't quite human. There's characters with wings, characters with horns, centaurs, and even Kayla herself has blue skin. So I feel like that just added to the overall whimsical and magical vibes of this story. And in my earlier update, I did mention how there was a romantic interest that was introduced for Kayla, and I wasn't quite feeling a connection to the romance at the time. But I am happy to say that overall, I did very much enjoy the romance in here, and I just found it really super cute and sweet. And while this book is overall cozy, there are a few tension-filled moments and exciting moments in here as well, especially towards the end. There are kind of like 2 little plot twists that happen. And there's also someone who lives on the island who is like one of those characters who is like a grump and cynical and pretty much the thorn in everyone's side on the island. And there's a point in this book where he almost ruined everything, and I was just like, you have to go right now. Get out of here, like, leave. So overall, I really enjoyed this book, and I definitely recommend it if you're looking for a warm-hearted, whimsical, cozy fantasy with romance and witchy vibes. So next, I think I'm going to pick up one of my graphic novels. Then after that, I'm going to jump into the unfortunate side effects of heartbreak and magic. So I am gonna go do some reading, and I'll be back when I have some updates. Hi, so I am back with a reading update. I read volume 1 of Hi, I'm a Witch, and my crush wants me to make a love potion. So this book follows Rose, who is a witch who lives in the woods, and currently she lives all alone because her grandmother passed away 4 years ago, and she only goes into town on occasion, and her only friend is a traveling merchant who visits her on occasion. And one day, not too long after Rose's grandmother passed away, Rose goes into town to get some supplies. And while she is there, she overhears two men talking about how they are glad that the witch, her grandmother, has died. And Rose is shocked by this conversation, and this is when she realizes that the people of the town have a negative view of witches. And while Rose does not speak up, a young knight named Harij does. He reprimands the two men for speaking ill of someone that they don't know, that is another fellow human being just like them. And that is the moment that Rose develops a crush on Harij. And now, at the start of the book, almost 4 years later, Harij ends up coming to her seeking a love potion. And Rose is devastated because she has a crush on him, so she doesn't want to make a love potion for him. And so she agrees to make the love potion for him, but she says that he has to collect the ingredients for her. And so she makes him go find the most outrageous ingredients and just keeps doing that because she's reluctant to make this love potion for him. And somewhere along the way of him gathering these ingredients, they also start to get to know each other a little bit more. And so our story goes from there. So for my thoughts, I thought this was a really fun and cute and lighthearted read. I know it's based on a light novel series. I liked our main character Rose. I liked our male love interest Harij. I feel like since it's only volume 1, we're just starting to learn about them. So they haven't had a huge amount of character development yet, but I like so far what we've seen of them. I also like that near the end of this book, we also get a chapter perspective from Harij's point of view, and we get to learn more about him, and we actually learned something that Rose doesn't know. And there was also something in here that was done with witch lore that I really liked as well. So in this book, one of the reasons why the witches isolate themselves from the rest of the world is because they can't lie, and so they don't want normal people knowing this truth about them because that could get them into a lot of trouble. And so I just like that small little detail of the world building. And so overall, I enjoyed this. I am interested in seeing where the story goes and learning more about the characters. And so I'll definitely be reading the next volume at some point. I know that there are currently 4 volumes of this published in the US. So in addition to reading this, I also started The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic. And so for this one, I'm on chapter 4, page 56, so not too far yet, but I thought I'd give my first thoughts and just tell you a little bit about what this book is about. So this book follows Sadie, who comes from a family of witches, and every member of her family has magic, but the magic also comes with a curse, and that's kind of like the way of keeping things in balance. And if an individual doesn't want to deal with the curse, then they can avoid the curse by giving up their magic. But if they want to use their magic, then they have to accept the curse. And Sadie's magic is super important to her, so she has accepted her curse. And her curse is that she will suffer 4 heartbreaks in her life, and each one will be worse than the one before it. And so far she has suffered 2 of these. Her first one was when her first love, Jacob, broke her heart and left their small town. And her second heartbreak was when her twin brother Seth left town and cut off all contact with her. Since those 2 heartbreaks, Sadie has built a wall around her heart. But at the beginning of this book, all these small signs of misfortune begin happening, and one of the things is the river floods. And when the river floods, that means someone is going to be returning to town. And the person that ends up returning is Jacob, her first crush and heartbreak. And now Jacob's sudden return to town is threatening the everyday routine and stability of Sadie's life. And to add to that Sadie has just learned that her grandmother has stage 4 cancer. And since her brother left, her grandmother is now the most important person in Sadie's life. And so that's about where I'm at in the story so far. And so for my thoughts, so far I am enjoying this. So right away, right from the start, the writing of this really pulled me in. There's just something about the writing style that just feels cozy and comforting and like a warm hug. And the back of this book says that is for fans of Gilmore Girls and practical magic, and those are definitely the vibes that I'm getting so far from this, because it takes place in a small town that feels like Stars Hollow, but with a witchy and magical twist to it. And so far, I'm just loving the cozy and whimsical vibes of the setting in this book. One example is Sadie runs a bakery with her grandmother, and it's not a normal bakery because each of their baked goods has a little bit of magic in them. And I really like how it describes that instead of having like the normal spices like cinnamon and cardamom in their bakery, their spices are labeled youth, friendship, love, kindness, forgetfulness, stability, health. And I feel like that really adds to like the coziness and witchy vibes of the book so far. And I also want to mention that this book takes place in the fall, so it is very much giving fall vibes. And I really appreciate that because the last book I read, The Spellshop, loved the magical, whimsical atmosphere of it, but it definitely did not have fall vibes. It was more like summer and spring vibes. And so I just really appreciate that this one has fall vibes. And also in the first 3 chapters that I read, there's already been the setup for the romance, and I think the romance has potential to be very good and angsty. And Sadie and Jacob end up reuniting in chapter 2 after not having seen each other in like 10 years. And already the tension and the angst between them is like coming right off the page. And so I think their romance has very good potential. And it's also clear that when they meet again that they both still have feelings for each other. And Sadie talks about in this book how her grandfather used to travel around for his job, and he used to bring Sadie's grandmother back a little spoon as a souvenir from each place that he went to, and Jacob ends up bringing Sadie a little spoon when they meet again. And I just thought that was so sweet. And I just want to read that passage where he ends up giving her the spoon because I feel like it's already a super powerful moment in the story so far. He gives her the spoon and she says, "You bought me a tiny spoon? I remember you saying how much you loved when your granddad would bring one to Gigi. You said that even though you never wanted to leave Poppy Meadows, you liked the thought of having little pieces of the world. And I went to a conference a few years ago in Texas and saw it. And look, I know it's about 10 years too late," he said. "I'm sure you hate me. I'd hate me too. I was an ass, but I was young and stupid and didn't know what I wanted. Not that that's an excuse. I apologized to you in my head 20 times the last 10 years, but I was too much of a coward to do it in real life." And just, I love that little passage and that little scene so much because you can just already feel like the tension and the angst and the potential of the romance. Also, just adding a little bit to the cozy feeling of this book, there are recipes in this book. So throughout the chapters, there's a mention of different food items, and some of those items at the end of the chapters have recipes to them. For example, at the end of chapter 1, you have a recipe for carrot cake cookies with cream cheese frosting, and those were the cookies that Sadie was baking in the bakery in that chapter. And it's legit like an actual recipe, like you have all the ingredients and you have the directions. So those are all my thoughts for now on this book. I'm not very far in, but I am enjoying it so far. Hi, so it is now Friday, September 6th, and I am back with a reading update. So on Wednesday, I finished The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic, and I ended up really enjoying this. It wasn't quite a 5-star for me. It ended up being a 4.5, and the reason it wasn't a 5-star was because there was a twist in the romance in here that I didn't like. But then after that first twist, there was another twist in the romance, and I did like that twist, and so I did end up liking the romance and how everything turned out, and I thought it was really cute overall. I just wish that first twist just didn't happen. However, that being said, the romance in this book is not the main focus of the book at all. It's just like a small little part of the book, and there's much more of a focus on family bonds and dealing with loss and grief. And our main character, Sadie, has a strong relationship with her twin brother, Seth, and I really loved exploring their relationship and seeing it play out throughout the book. And we are also introduced to Sadie's aunts and uncles, and I just loved getting to see all their different types of magic and getting to see how their magic played into their personalities. And overall, one of my favorite parts of this book was the strong family bonds. And overall, I loved Sadie's family and how they all came together and were there for each other during a rough time. Also, I must mention that Sadie's house in here is kind of alive, and I just loved how that added to the overall coziness and whimsical feeling of the story. For example, the grandfather clock is described as never paying attention to time, so when it does chime, then there is some significance to that chime. The cozy, whimsical, and magical vibes of this book were definitely one of my favorite parts of it. Sadie was always cooking and baking comforting food. There's also Sadie's family garden, which also gives cozy and magical vibes. And in addition to that, there were also animal companions in here. There's a chocolate lab puppy named Bambi in here, and a black cat named Simon. And so those are just like a few of the elements that made this book feel super cozy. However, even though this book had a lot of cozy vibes, it wasn't a completely lighthearted read. There were heavier and darker moments in here as well, especially since a large portion of the book deals with Sadie dealing with the loss of someone very important to her, and also potentially losing someone else if they don't find a solution to a certain problem. But I found that even during these darker moments in the book, there was always still a sense of hope, and usually that sense of hope came from family and friends. Overall, I was very happy with how this ended. It did end on a very heartwarming and hopeful note. One last thing I want to mention about this book is the writing style. I absolutely love the writing style in here, and I thought it helps contribute to the overall cozy feeling of the book. And it also just had so many quotable moments, and I want to share 2 of my favorite quotes from this book. So the first one is, "And Sadie knew in that moment that being afraid didn't make someone weak or a coward. Doing something in spite of heartbreak or fear, that's where courage came in." And then the second one is, "But a trail of hope followed her all the way home. It tasted bright and pure like the first piece of stocking candy on Christmas morning, or the sleepy thoughts you have right before you fall to sleep." And so those are just 2 examples of the writing style in this book, which I really loved. So next, I'm going to read the other manga I want to read in this video, which is A Cat from Our World and the Forgotten Witch. And then after I read that, I'm going to hop into my last novel of this video, and that is Witch of Wild Things. This part is really funny. So in this book, the witch summons a guardian beast who is this giant cat, though I guess the cat was just a house cat in its previous life, but it gets reincarnated as this guardian cat, and it's giant. And the witch says that they need to do some cleaning, and she's like, "Okay, I'll clean this side, you clean that side," and the cat just decides to take a nap instead. And she's like, "Hey, what are you lazing about for?" And she says, "Guardian beasts obey their master's orders and faithfully devote themselves to their work." And the cat thinks, "Madam, you're describing a dog." That's just really funny. Look, that's so cute. It's a little content, it's a little drawing. It's so cute. I'm here with an update. It is now Wednesday, September 11th. So I have two things to talk about. First is this graphic novel, A Cat from Our World and the Forgotten Witch. So this, I just randomly picked this up on a whim from the library because the cover was cute. But this book was absolutely adorable. And I think I even like this one more than the Hi, I'm a Witch one. And I will definitely be reading more of this one. So this one follows a cat who is living in our world but then gets run over by a truck. But then the cat is reincarnated into a fantasy world when a witch summons him. So he gets reborn in this other world as a guardian beast. And so he is a giant in this other world. The book is just about him navigating his new life in this world and getting to know his owner, who is this witch who lives in the woods by herself. And so it's just a really super cute and sweet little book, and it's adorable, and it made me laugh and smile. But even though it is overall really cute, there are some darker moments in it, because throughout this book you also get a look at the witch's life and her past was not a happy one. But overall, I love this. 5 stars. I will definitely be reading the other volumes. I'm not sure how many volumes it is. I just know that volume 3 just came out in America this month, and then volume 4 is scheduled for January, and there's a volume 5 scheduled for May of next year. So that is that. And then I also, since the last time I updated this vlog, I had finished Witch of Wild Things. So I finished this last Saturday. And I have mixed opinions on this book. But before I talk about my thoughts, I am going to tell you a little bit about what this book is about. This book follows 29-year-old Sage Flores, and at the beginning of the book, she loses her job, so she is forced to move back home to her hometown of Cranberry and to move back into her childhood house where her aunt and sister still live. And her hometown is the last place that she wants to be because there was a tragedy 8 years ago where her younger sister Sky died. And ever since her sister died, her relationship with her aunt and especially her sister Teal have been really strained. And so Sage really doesn't want to go back home, but she has no choice, and her plan is just to lie low, get a job, earn some money, and then get out of there. And so she ends up taking back her old high school job at a farm. But what she doesn't expect is the reappearance of her high school crush and the boy who broke her heart, Tennessee Reyes. And unfortunately, he also was just hired at the farm. And to make matters even worse, they end up being paired together to hunt down rare plants. And to add even more complications to Sage's life, her sister Sky's ghost has been haunting her and says that she can only move on if Sage makes up with Teal. So that's the main gist of the story. And now for my thoughts. So I mentioned that I had mixed opinions about this because there were things that I liked, but then there was also a large number of things that didn't quite click with me. So first I'm going to talk about the things that I liked. So my favorite part of this book, and a part of the book I really liked, was the romance. I really liked the romance between Sage and Tennessee. It was a slow burn and sort of a second chance romance. So Sage and Tennessee, they have a past history. They went to the same high school, and Tennessee was super popular, but Sage was not, but she had a crush on him. And so to talk to him, she ends up finding out his AOL screen name and instant messaging him, which one of my other favorite parts of the book is at the beginning of certain chapters, you actually have instant message conversations between Sage and Tennessee. And here's like one example. So I just thought that was really cool. And I could relate to the whole instant messaging thing because I grew up with AOL and instant messaging and dial-up internet. And so I just thought that whole backstory was super cute. The only thing about their romance that bothered me a little bit is, so Sage is always saying in the book that Tennessee broke her heart. That's why she's really reluctant in the beginning to become attached to him again, because she's afraid that he'll break her heart again, and so she doesn't want to give him a second chance. But at the same time, I'm like, girl, it's been over 10 years. This is when you were in high school. Just give him a chance. And she does eventually end up giving him a second chance. And the romance just ends up being super cute and sweet. And then another thing I liked about the book was the magic. So all the women in Sage's family, they have certain magical powers, and Sage's is that she has a connection to the earth and to plants. And because of her power, she's able to just look at any plant and know what it is, even if it's still a seed. And her sisters also have their own unique power, as does her aunt and as does her grandmother and her mother. So I like that part of the book too. And overall, I liked how the story ended. However, I do have one problem with the ending, and that is how we got to the ending. So there's this one thing that just like happens that magically makes everything better. And I love a happy ending, but it felt too convenient. I know this is a witchy magical book, but I felt like this was pushing the envelope a little bit for me. And how this thing happened, it also magically made some other problems of the story go away. That just didn't really click with me because I feel like it invalidated those problems. Kind of like the characters had been struggling with this and now all of a sudden it's just poof, magically gone. And then another thing that didn't personally click with me was the tone of the book for the beginning, and most of the book is it's overall very harsh and bleak. I don't really like overly sad or bleak stories. Like, a book can have a bleak or sad tone, but I also need something to balance that out with, so I need like some silver lining, some sense of hope in the book that shows that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And this didn't really have that at the beginning. Like, it just kept getting more and more bleak and harsh. And one example of this is that in the beginning you're introduced to a bunch of awful characters that just keep hurting other people, and it just like got depressing. So you have Sage's ex-boss, who wasn't a nice person. You have Sage's sister's abusive boyfriend. You have her other friend's cheating husband. And then also add to that, there's a park ranger that is just like mean to Sage in the book for like no reason whatsoever. So I could see those other three, but the fourth one, I was like, do we really have to also have this ranger be a jerk too? And so that bothered me, and also almost stopped reading this book because the tone was just so harsh and bleak at the beginning. Like, it does get a little bit better, especially with the introduction of Tennessee, because first of all, he's just like a really good guy and he brings some hope and some light to the story once Sage decides to let him in and give him a chance. And so those were a couple parts of the book that just didn't click with me, and because of that, I'm giving this book 3 stars. I feel like if this book had just been about the romance between Sage and Tennessee, then I would have enjoyed this a lot more. But because it had that other stuff in it that didn't quite click with me, I couldn't enjoy it as much as I would have liked to. And that being said, that's just my own personal opinion. I'm sure that this is probably a perfect book for someone else out there. It's just not 100% for me. So to wrap up this video, I'm just going to quickly go over all the books that I read in this video and give some final thoughts. The first book I read was The Spellshop by Sarah Beth Durst, and I gave this 4 stars. This one, out of all the books I read, was definitely the most cozy, the most lighthearted. Definitely read this one if you want magical, whimsical vibes and just a book that feels like a warm hug and a book that is a comfort read. And the second book I read was volume 1 of the manga Hi, I'm a Witch and My Crush Wants Me to Make a Love Potion, which I'll put a picture of that up on the screen because at the moment I don't know where it is. And this one I'm giving 4 stars because it's just super cute, but not anything like extraordinary. But I am definitely interested in reading more of this series. And then the third book I read was The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic by Brianne Randall. And this one I gave 4.5 stars. It wasn't quite a 5-star because of the twist in the romance. But like The Spellshop, this one felt super whimsical and magical, and overall it was very cozy and sweet, but it's not completely lighthearted because it does deal with the topic of losing a loved one, which I think this handled it very well though. After that, I read A Cat from Our World and the Forgotten Witch. This, utterly adorable, 5 stars. And then lastly, the book I just talked about, Witch Wild Things. This one I gave 3 stars because it wasn't completely my cup of tea. But that being said, this one was the most romance focused of the 3 novels I read in this video. So if you are looking for a witchy book that is focused on the romance, then this one might be the book for you. So those are all the books I read in this video. Let me know down below if you read any of these, what you thought of them. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!